Good morning, Sokaloo here. Yes, we are going to talk about Texas and Alabama in this video. I have tried several different ways over the years of doing game predictions in terms of how or what games I talk about and what videos. I've done different prediction videos for each conference in the past. Anyway, I've done different ways. What we're going to try, see how it goes. I'm going to try breaking it down into time slots now. So today's video will be uh, my thoughts on some of the bigger primetime games coming up week 2 of the 2023 college football season, which of course includes Texas and Alabama. Let's see, what time is that game? 7 o'clock on ESPN. So we are going to talk about that, but there's a few others that I want to talk about in this video as well. Let's start with Cincinnati on the road at Pitt, 6:30 on the CW network, ACC, live on the CW. I think it comes on right after Smallville, or so, I don't know. But anyway, both teams are undefeated at 1-0. Pitt is a 7-point home favorite in this one. Pitt beat Wofford last week 45-7. Cincinnati beat Eastern Kentucky 66-13. The reason I wanted to talk about this, who knows who the quarterback for Cincinnati is? Raise your hand if you know who the quarterback for Cincinnati is. That's right, our old buddy, Emily Jones. Shout out to Emily Jones. He's the quarterback at Cincinnati, and you're thinking, wow, how's he still in I think he's a 6-year guy, so I think this will be his last year. But anyway, yeah, he's the quarterback at Cincinnati. I mentioned they beat Eastern Kentucky last week, 66-13. Now, listen, nobody had more fun at Emory Jones' expense than I did during his time at Florida. But look you know what he did last week? Listen to these numbers last week for Emory Jones. 19 of 23 passing, 345 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. 26 rushing yards for another 2 touchdowns. That's right, our buddy Emory Jones scored 7 touchdowns last week. I think that's more than he's scored in his entire career. Now they take this circus on the road to Pitt. Cincinnati, of course, now is a Power 5 team. So this will be Cincinnati's first Power 5 versus Power 5 matchup. Of course, Cincinnati's played Power 5 teams in the past, but they were a group of 5 member at the time. So this is their first P5 versus P5 matchup for Cincinnati on the road at Pitt. Pitt a 7-point favorite. You know what? I'm going to take Cincinnati and the points. What is going on with Emory? I don't know. I'm not a big believer in Pitt. Jerkovic, another guy, has been in college forever. Now, there are some people that are picking Pitt as like a sleeper team in the ACC, so maybe I could be totally off base here. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. Maybe Pitt finds a way to win it at home, but it's closer than a touchdown. So give me Cincinnati and the 7 points. The fighting Emily Jones on the road at Pitt, I'll take Cincinnati. Oregon at Texas Tech. This game is disappointing. I talked about this game a lot in the offseason. I tried to get people excited about this game because, well, I'm a moron. That's why. I thought Texas Tech was going to be pretty good this year. In fact, I thought they were a sleeper team to perhaps compete for the Big 12 title. It doesn't look like that's the case after they lost to a group of 5 team in week 1. They just didn't look good at all. Oregon, on the other hand, looked absolutely unstoppable. I know it was against Portland State, but Jesus, they scored 70, 80-something points in that game. It's just insanity. Bo Nix is going to have an absolute monster year at quarterback for Oregon. I think their defense is going to be better this year under Dan Lanning in year 2 than what it was last year, and they've got a lot of weapons offensively. Now, the game is at Texas Tech, and there's been some talk over the last few days that, the classic sort of, well, Texas Tech was overlooking the first game and focusing too much on Oregon, and it bit them. They really aren't that bad, yada, blah, blah, blah. I'm not buying it. Oregon is less than a touchdown favorite here at 6.5. Better bet this now. This might go up over a touchdown by kickoff. You're better off, if you like Oregon, betting this thing now at 6.5. This one comes on 7 o'clock on Fox. Give me Oregon on the road and lay the 6.5. Wisconsin on the road at Washington State. This one is tough for me. I'm high on Wisconsin this year. In fact, I believe I picked them to go 10-2 with losses to Ohio State at home. I can't remember who I picked for their second loss. But anyway, so I'm high on Wisconsin. I like Luke Fickell. I think he's going to do a good job there at Wisconsin. Both these teams are 1-0. I also believe that the Pac-12 is undervalued as a conference. The national perception of the Pac-12 versus what the Pac-12 actually is way off, in my opinion. And because of that, you sometimes see lines that you can take advantage of. Wisconsin's a 6.5-point road favorite on the road at Washington, 7:30 on ABC. Everything in me says that Wisconsin is going to win this game. But I'm going to take Washington State in the points. I think this one ends up being close. Really could go either way. I'm having a hard time deciding on this game after watching some Washington State from last week. We even had a Washington State caller on the call-in show, and he told me, Lou, you better go with Washington State. So, hey, lady, I'm going with Washington State and the points. Although Wisconsin could still win. I don't know, but I'm going to take Washington State and the points there. McNeese at Florida. Look, I know Florida looked terrible against Utah, and a point and a laugh. If Florida were to lose this game to McNeese, it would be off the charts in terms of the point and laugh factor. I get that. But as bad as Florida is, McNeese is worse. McNeese lost last week 52-34 to something called Tarleton State. Florida will win this game. It's a home game for Florida, their first home game of the year. It's on ESPNU at 7:30. There's not a line available for this game. A lot of times when a team is playing one of these FCS or really low-tier teams, either a line won't come out at all or it doesn't come out until like Thursday or Friday. So you may be able to find a line on this game somewhere by the time you watch this video. But as of the time I'm recording it, there's not even an available line to bet here. I think Florida wins big. I think they use this game to work on some of the things that they had trouble with last week on the road at Utah, like running the ball, some different defensive things, pass protection for Graham Mertz. You may even see a second or third quarterback get an opportunity to play in this game for Florida. But yes, it would be funny if Florida lost to McNeese. No, I don't see it happening. Give me the Gators to win big in that one. Arizona at Mississippi State. Shout out to my man Zona Tucson. How you doing? Man, I hope to see you in January, sir. Las Vegas. That's right. Lou is headed to Las Vegas in January. Oh, Lord. Things could go really, really wrong. Anyway, Arizona at Mississippi State, 7:30 on the SEC Network. Both these teams are 1-0. Arizona beat Northern Arizona last week. Blew them out, basically. And Mississippi State did the same thing to Southeast Louisiana. I do think the Pac-12 is undervalued, and I do think Arizona is the better of the two Arizona schools. I do not think Arizona can get this win on the road at Mississippi State. Sorry, Zona Tucson, man. I just don't think they can pull this one off. I just don't think they can do it. Mississippi State's an 8-point home favorite. I actually think Mississippi State covers the 8, too. I think they win, somewhere 10 to 14 points, that kind of thing. We'll see. The SEC has not had a good start to the season in terms of Power 5 versus Power 5 matchups. The SEC right now is 1-3 in Power 5 matchups. South Carolina lost to North Carolina. LSU lost to Florida State. And, of course, Florida lost to Utah. The only Power 5 versus Power 5 win for the SEC so far this season, Tennessee over Virginia. Got a chance to correct some of that this week with the Texas-Alabama game. Here with the Arizona-Mississippi State game. Of course, you got Texas and Alabama, like I mentioned. And also, which we'll talk about in a second, Auburn at Cal. But, yeah, Arizona at Mississippi State, 7:30 SEC Network. Mississippi State an 8-point favorite. I'm going to take Mississippi State and lay the 8 points. Stanford on the road at Southern Cal. Late night football here, 10:30 on Fox. Stanford 1-0. 1-0. They beat Hawaii, but they only beat Hawaii 37-24. About the same amount that Vandy beat Hawaii. Not a good sign for Stanford getting ready to travel and take on the Trojans in Los Angeles. Southern Cal, of course, is 2-0, having played a Week 0 game. Now, they've played two, kind of nobody, San Jose State and Nevada, But nevertheless, 2 games experience for Southern Cal, better than 1 for Stanford. And look, Southern Cal's just a way better team than Stanford. Stanford's been kind of circling a drain football-wise for the last couple of years. They just haven't been good. Headed to the ACC, it looks like, in the very near future. Right now, still in the Pac-12. Southern Cal's a 29.5-point favorite. That's a lot of points. A lot of points. You got to figure Southern Cal's going to give up some points, don't you? Yeah, but you know what? I'm actually going to take Southern Cal to cover here. I think Southern Cal has an offensive explosion at home against Stanford. And even if Stanford scores somewhere in the 20-point range, I think Southern Cal can get to the 50 mark and cover the spread. It's a huge spread. I probably won't bet that game. This is just a pick I'm making. But give me Southern Cal, lay the 29.5. Auburn on the road at Cal, another interesting game here. Cal beat North Texas 58-21 last week. Auburn beat a bad UMass team 59-14. The Auburn quarterback situation is iffy to me at best. Will they have Jacquez Rogers back running the ball? He didn't play last week against UMass, their best running back. I'm not that high on Cal. I know they beat North Texas. Auburn's favored by under a touchdown here on the road at 6.5. Long way to travel, unfamiliar environments, time zone changes, the whole deal. I'm going to take Auburn. I think they cover the 6.5. I trust Hugh Freeze to keep that team together on the road and go out and get that win. Oklahoma State on the road at Arizona State. This could be a really good game, too. Oklahoma State beat Central Arkansas last week, but barely. Not a very impressive win. Arizona State beat Southern Utah 24-21. Two 1-0 teams. 2 teams that weren't very good last year. Both want to improve this year. I think whoever wins this game, most likely well on their way to a bowl game. Whoever loses this game could have some issues on down the road. Oklahoma State, I believe, is favored by 3.5 in this one. I'm having a hard time reading my writing. I'm going to take Oklahoma State to win the game. I'm not going to bet it, so forget the spread. I'm going to take Oklahoma State to go on the road and get a win over Arizona State. You got Mike Gundy. He's been there for 100 years. I trust what he's got going on early in a season with the continuity of being there forever versus what's going on at Arizona State. So give me Oklahoma State to win that one. All right, on to the Texas and Bama game. Texas travels to Tuscaloosa to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide, a matchup of 2 top 10 teams in some rankings. Alabama in the top 5 everywhere. Texas top 10, some borderline 10. 8, anywhere 8 to 12 really. Probably a good spot for Texas. Big game, huge game, best game of the week, no question about it, especially in primetime. Again, we're just talking about primetime games. I'm going to do another one of these videos for the afternoon games and the noon games as the week goes along. But Texas is 1-0. They beat Rice last week. Alabama is 1-0. They beat Middle Tennessee State last week. You watch those games, you kind of get the feeling neither team really showed their cards all that much, right? Both teams played a lot of different players, especially in the second half. Texas let the backup quarterback Malik Murphy play. Bama played 3 different quarterbacks in that game. Ty Simpson and Tyler Buckner got in. Jalen Milroe, of course, got to start. Jalen Milroe looked better than I thought he would throwing the ball, so I got to give credit where credit is due. I was hard on him all offseason. Now, still not convinced he's some kind of elite passer of the football, but the expectations were pretty low for his in terms of his passing ability. And he exceeded those expectations in my mind. The Alabama defense played about like we expected the Alabama defense to play. Their running game, to me, was not great. I know they played a lot of different running backs, but Jalen Milroe was their leading rusher. And like I said, I know they played a bunch of different running backs. They had 4 or 5 running backs with 40 yards or something like that. But Jalen Milroe was the leading rusher for the team. I don't think that's a trend that can continue for Bama. If they want to get where they want to go, right? They need running backs to run the ball. Not that Jalen Milroe doesn't need to ever run. That's the best part about his game. But a couple of things about the Alabama game that we talked about on the call-in show last night that I think are huge positives and good signs for Alabama. Number one, they only had 2 penalties against Middle Tennessee State. If you watched Alabama play last year, one of their biggest problems, very uncharacteristically, was penalties. Penalties killed them in multiple spots in multiple games. They were shooting themselves in the foot. It's the only Nick Saban team I've ever seen be that undisciplined in terms of penalties last year. I believe they were the most penalized team in the SEC last year. Against Middle Tennessee State, only 2 penalties. That's acceptable. Now, obviously, Saban's a perfectionist. A lot of coaches are. They want 0 penalties ever, and that would be great too. But I think most fans, most coaches, and most players would be happy if at the end of the game they look down at the stat sheet and see that there was only 2 penalties for the game. That was the case for Alabama. Also, the receivers managed to catch the ball a little bit on Saturday, which is another minor miracle, as Alabama also led the SEC in drop passes last year. I still don't believe that Alabama's got a top-end elite wide receiver that can take the tops off of defenses that scares opposing defensive coordinators like they are used to having with your Calvin Jones, your Riley Ridleys, your Jerry Jeudy's, your Devontae Smith, your Jamison Williams. I don't believe there's anybody on Alabama's roster with those types of capabilities or abilities. But it could be that they find 3 or 4 wide receivers that are good enough. We'll see. We'll see. Their offensive line was as advertised last week. The defense was as advertised last week. As far as Texas goes, there's been, at least from what I've seen around the internet, there's been more criticism of Texas coming out of week 1 than there has been of Alabama coming out of week 1. I don't put a whole lot of stock in that criticism of Texas. Again, I don't really think either one of these teams showed up for their week 1 games with both barrels loaded. There was a lot of chess match type stuff going on between Alabama and Texas all offseason. You know, Bama didn't want to name a starting QB. I think that had a lot to do with the Texas game. And when you play these low-level teams, right, especially when you have a big game the following week, you're not going to come out in those games and just lay all your cards on the table. I think that was the case for both teams this week. I thought Quinn Ewers played good. I think he probably needs to play a little bit better this week on the road in Tuscaloosa if Texas wants to pull off this upset win. And the Texas running game has got to show up. You know, they lost Bijan Robinson. They don't have another Bijan Robinson on that roster, but they have got to find a way, whether it's by committee or 1 or 2 guys or whatever it is, to keep Alabama honest with their ability to run the ball. Texas has an amazing group of wide receivers. This is probably the best wide receiver room Alabama will play all year, at least during the regular season. We'll see if they get to the postseason who they would get matched up with there. But I think Texas has a top 3. You know, we can argue where in the top 3 if you want, but I think Texas has a top 3 or 4 wide receiver room in the country. This is an NFL on NFL matchup here when you're talking about the Texas wide receivers versus that Alabama secondary. Alabama might have the best secondary in the country. Definitely top 2 or 3. Now, they're playing some young guys with Rabini growing pains. Caleb Downs, true freshman, is going to start at safety. They've got 3 secondary players that are on the questionable list for this week. Now, I tend to think that those players are going to play, but you never know. That's the thing. You know, college football, you know, when it comes to injuries in college football, it's not regulated or mandated in terms of the reporting of the injuries. It's not regulated or mandated like it is in the NFL. So, again, this is an area where coaches tend to play games and play chess. You know, if there's a player that's injured and the reporter asks them about it, and you notice if you've ever watched any of your team's coach press conferences, they don't ever answer any questions honestly or truthfully when it comes to injuries. They just don't, because they don't have to. And why would you tell the other team if a certain player is 60% versus 80%, 80% versus 100%? He's definitely playing, he's definitely not playing. Why would you do it if you don't have to? And these coaches don't. So my guess would be that that those 3 secondary players for Bama play, and I think it's important that they do play. Alabama looked better to me in week 1 than Texas did. But again, it's oftentimes hard to tell what a team really has when they play one of these lower level teams that they're so much more talented than. Because they're not implementing the full playbook, they're pulling starters. Look, a lot of these teams that have the depth to do it will pull starters in the first quarter. Not that they don't play again. I'm just talking about the rotation of players. Alabama did this at the running back position. You know, I don't expect Alabama's running back rotation to be the same in week 2 against Texas as it was against Middle Tennessee State. Does anybody watching this think that's going to be the case? No, they're going to find the 1 or 2 hot hands at running back, and that's who's going to play running back for Alabama on Saturday, right? Isn't that what you would expect? Same thing with Texas with the wide receiver. You play a bunch of wide receivers. You play a bunch of defensive linemen and linebackers. You try to figure out. There's a lot you're trying to figure out in week 1. So, yeah, I think Alabama looked a little bit better than Texas in week 1. But, again, I think this is going to be a great game. And as a college football fan, just a college football fan in general, I'm hoping it's a great game. Because this is one of the biggest games of the year this season. I don't care how much you love or hate Bama or Texas. It's hard to find 2 bigger brands in the world of college football than Alabama and Texas. This is a game that every single college football fan on earth has been talking about since the minute last season ended. And then you can throw Ohio State and Notre Dame in there too, who play in 2 weeks in week 4. But you're talking about 2 huge brands, brands that have been relevant in college football for decade after decade after decade. It's an absolute monster game, just like it was last year. And as a college football fan, I'm hoping for a game similar to last year. A game that's close and competitive in the fourth quarter. A game that keeps me drawn to the TV for the entirety of the game. That's what I'm hoping. Now, if I was an Alabama fan, I want to win 50-0. If I'm a Texas fan, I want to win 50-0. I get all that. But as a college football fan, I'm hoping for a great game. Alabama, of course, is the home favorite here. As of this morning, they're favored by 7.5. In my preseason prediction videos, where I go through team by team and pick every single game on their schedule, I did pick Texas to win this game in both the Alabama prediction video and the Texas video. Now, oftentimes during the season, I will pick against my preseason predictions. You'd be an idiot to just blindly follow your preseason predictions week after week after week after week after week as the college football season goes along, right? There's obviously going to be things you were wrong about in your preseason predictions, and to just stick your head in the sand and ignore that would be ridiculous. So I'm open to picking either team here this week heading into the game. Over a touchdown favorite at home for Bama. I'm going to go with Texas in this one and take the points. I'm not as convinced as I was in the offseason that Texas will win this game because Bama looked better than I thought, and specifically because Jalen Milroe threw the ball better than I thought he would. With that being said, that was Middle Tennessee State in a calm and relaxed environment, even though it was at home. Now, this is another home game for Bama, so it won't be a hostile crowd, but the lights are going to be turned up to 11 here in this one. Everybody is watching. How will Jalen Milroe perform? The last time he was in a spot like this last season, he did not perform well. He did not perform well at all. Now, that was a year ago. He's had a year's worth of practices since then. He had a start last week. I 100% expect Jalen Milroe to be better in this game than the starts we saw him and the games we saw him play in last year. I also don't expect Jalen Milroe to be as good in week 2 as he was in week 1 because of the competition. That's it. Texas has a legitimate defense. Is Jalen Milroe and the Alabama offense going to test that defense? Yeah, 100%. And Alabama's got the ability to beat that defense on occasion. There's no doubt about it. Texas is not about to come out here and shut Alabama out. So I'm not saying that I expect Milroe to get worse physically from week 1 to week 2. It's just a competition issue to me. So I think Milroe will play somewhere in between what we saw last year and what we saw in week 1. Texas offensively, Quinn Ewers, number 1, he has to start the game and he's got to finish the game, right? That was an issue last year. And he's got to have the game of his life. These wide receivers are going to have to play well. They're going to have to win a lot of 50-50 balls. As good as these wide receivers are, they're not just going to be running wide open downfield. This is a NFL-level secondary that Alabama has when it comes to talent, period. Again, I know there are issues with the 3 players that are sort of nursing some injuries heading into the game. I'm operating under the assumption that those 3 guys are going to play because I believe that they are. None of the injuries are season-ending or appear to be all that serious. It's sort of the coach speak, sort of the day-to-day thing. I tend to think they're going to play, and I'm going to operate under that assumption. But I'm going to take Texas in the points in this game. I think Texas can keep it close enough. Part of this pick, I'm going to be honest, is just me as a college football fan wanting this game to be close. Yes, Georgia is my favorite team. I don't do anything to hide that on this channel, and everyone knows that. But more than that, I'm a college football fan first. I'm a college football fan first. I absolutely love the game of college football. I think it's the greatest sport on earth. I think it's the greatest sport mankind has ever invented. And anytime I watch one of these huge marquee matchups, not involving Georgia, the one thing that I'm really rooting for, because people ask me all the time, who you rooting for in this? I don't root for or against teams unless Georgia is playing. Now, if I have money on a game, yeah, I've got to hope that one team or the other wins by a certain amount or loses by less than a certain amount or whatever. I'm not going to bet on this game because I don't want to be in that situation while I'm watching this game. I want to be able to watch this game, enjoy it for what it is, And part of me is just hoping for a really good game. And if Alabama pulls out a miracle win at the end, or Texas pulls out a miracle win at the end, or whatever, if this game is competitive in the fourth quarter, I think we all win as college football fans. That's what I'm hoping for, and maybe that has something to do with it. I obviously would not be at all surprised to see Alabama win this game. Alabama's the most talented roster in the country, top to bottom. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And there's not a single team in college football that if Alabama beats them, it should be a surprise. But I am going to take Texas in the 7.5 points and hope for a close game. There you go. That is a roundup and my thoughts on the primetime games for week 2 in 2023. I'm going to be doing this same video for the noon games and then a similar video for the afternoon games. So if there are some noon or some afternoon games that you're curious about, you want to know my thoughts on, comment down below which games you want to hear my thoughts on that are coming up this week, and I'll be sure and include those in the videos that I do about the noon games and then the videos I do about the 3:30 games. Streaming schedule this week for the games, I'm going to be game streaming Friday night, Kansas and Illinois. I think this is an exciting game. These are two teams that were way better than anybody thought last year. Some expectations that they could both be good again this year, and they come on Friday night, I think, at 7:30. So if you have no life outside of college football like me, and you're going to be home on a Friday night watching Kansas and Illinois, come on over to the channel, hang out with us. We're going to have a really good time watching Kansas and Illinois. My game stream on Saturday, I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm waiting on the Patreon poll to finish up on Thursday. It looks like the Patreon stream will be Saturday night prime time. So it looks like all these games that I talked about in this video will be live streamed on the Patreon page, according to the Patreon poll, unless something changes drastically between now and Thursday. So if that happens and I end up streaming the primetime games on Patreon, then I will do a YouTube stream either for the noon or the 3:30 games. And I'll finalize all that by Thursday and let you know. Anyway, please hit the thumbs up if you hadn't already. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I do this year-round, college football, 365 days a year here on YouTube. I appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.